This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 4 people killed as powerful earthquake jolts Turkey and Greece. A Kenyan court has sentenced Westgate mall attack suspects to up to 33 years in jail. And Tanzanian President John Magufuli takes the lead as vote counting continues. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. South African state power utility Eskom makes a net loss of $1.3 billion. And the World Bank warns that Somalia's economy will shrink by 2.5%. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin with news from Turkey and Greece, where at least 12 people have died following an earthquake that hit the Aegean Sea on Friday. Authorities in Turkey are reporting that the death toll from the quake that hit the city of Izmir now stands at 12, with over 400 people injured. Turkish officials said some 90 people have been pulled from the rubble, and search and rescue efforts are being stepped up after several buildings collapsed. There was also what officials called a small-scale tsunami. Images on social media also showed water rushing through the streets. The quake also hit Greece. All right, let's now bring in CGTN's Mikhail Bardavid, who is in Istanbul. Mikhail Bardavid, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Mikhail, a devastating tragedy there. We understand that the authorities are still assessing the damage. What more can you tell us so far?
Well, yes, certainly. Right now we're seeing that 419 people were injured and at least 12 people have been reportedly killed. There are also 2 people who were killed in the Greek island of Samos, 2 teens that were left onto buildings there. Now, this is, of course, a developing story, so it's still not clear how many casualties there are because there are a lot of damaged buildings in the city of Izmir right now. Over 70 people were rescued initially. Now over 90 people have been rescued from these collapsed buildings. There were at least 67 aftershocks that were reported by officials. There was a magnitude 5.1 earthquake that also took place at the province of Aydın in Turkey as well. It was felt in many cities across Turkey, specifically in the province of Muğla, but also here in Istanbul as well. The quake was also felt across the Greek islands, even in the Greek capital of Athens. In the coastal city of Seferihisar, there was a small scale of a tsunami. There were some people who were trapped on the second floor buildings there. Also very troubling times in these areas. The marinas in Turkey have also received a lot of damage. Many boats are also floating away in these areas on the coastal regions where there were also fears of more potential tsunamis that might take place. So still they are assessing the damage that has happened at this moment.
All right, Mikhail Bardavid, thank you for that information. I just got to ask you about the rescue efforts. Tell us more about how those affected are being assisted, if you will.
Well, right now there's a lot of effort in the city of Izmir at this moment. At least 17 buildings, there are a lot of damage, and people are trying to rescue the people who are trapped inside. The governor of Izmir has also closed the highways that reach or enter the city of Izmir. They're trying to make it easier for rescue efforts to continue, for rescue teams to reach the sites. They've been calling for people to stay away from traffic for quite a long time now. It's been a few hours since the earthquake hit those regions. So they're really making the best of their efforts for to make it easier for the rescue teams. The Defense Ministry has stated that they have established a crisis center there. They're sending helicopters to the region to support the rescue efforts at the moment. There's been a lot of messages of support for Turkey as well. One message was from the French Interior Minister, where there's been a lot of tension between France and Turkey in the meantime over the last couple of days. Now, the French minister has stated that French aid can be immediately dispatched to the spot if the governments of these countries, Turkey and Greece, so wish to be so. The President of the European Council, Charles Michel, has also stated that the EU is ready to offer its support as well. Azerbaijan has also offered its support in case Turkey needs it at this moment as rescue efforts are continuing.
All right, Mikhail Bardavid, thank you so much for that update and report. Mikhail Bardavid speaking to us from Istanbul. Let's turn our attention now to Tanzania, where the ruling party, the Chama cha Mapinduzi, has taken an early lead in the country's presidential elections. Latest results show incumbent President John Magufuli, who is seeking a second term in office, in the lead, with 85% of the votes from the 142 constituency results announced by the Tanzanian Election Commission. The main opposition presidential candidate, Tundu Lissu, has, however, rejected the results, claiming the vote was marred by irregularities. 2 South Sudanese soldiers and 2 Ugandan soldiers have been killed in a confrontation along the border between the two countries. Their armies clashed near the town of Ngomoromo. Isabel Nakiria has the details.
South Sudan has accused the Ugandan army of crossing into its territory and launching an attack. The South Sudan army says the Ugandan army used heavy artillery and machine guns to attack its defense unit in Pogi in Magui County before they were forced to retaliate. A statement from the South Sudan army spokesperson says the brief clash resulted in both armies losing 2 soldiers each. The Ugandan army also captured a South Sudanese soldier as well as some ammunition. The Ugandan army now says the bodies of the fallen soldiers have been handed back to South Sudan for burial, but they insist the attack took place on Ugandan soil. Both countries are investigating the confrontation and say they will work out peaceful means to restore stability along their joint border. Uganda and South Sudan have had good diplomatic and trade relations, and both countries say they are committed to maintaining peace. Uganda also supported South Sudan during its 5-year civil war and played a key role in maintaining peace there. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
A Kenyan court has sentenced 2 men to 33 and 18 years respectively for their roles in a 2013 terror attack at the Westgate shopping mall in the capital, Nairobi. Mohammed Ahmed Abdi and Hassan Hussein Mustafa were found guilty of aiding 4 gunmen from Somali militant group Al-Shabaab who carried out the attacks. Here's CGTN's Robert Nagila with that report.
I find them guilty and convict them accordingly as follows.
3 weeks after a Kenyan court found Mohammed Ahmed Abdi and Hassan Hussein Mustafa guilty for their roles in the 2013 Westgate Mall terror attack in Nairobi, the 2 men were sentenced to 33 and 19 years, but will serve 26 and 11 years respectively for time served. Both men were convicted earlier this month for conspiring and aiding the attackers from the Somali militant group Al-Shabaab. At least 67 people died in the assault. Shortly after the attack, Kenyan authorities arrested 4 men for allegedly playing roles in the attack. One suspect was released in January 2019, and a second suspect, Liban Abdullahi, a Somali refugee, was acquitted early this month due to lack of evidence. Initially, authorities had said there had been 10 attackers, but revised that figure downwards to 4, saying all the attackers had been killed in the security operation that followed. The trial of the accused began in early 2019 with 12 counts of terrorism-related charges against them, with the prosecution lining up 40 witnesses. The court found that Abdi and Mustafa supported and helped the gunmen who carried out the attack. The court also ruled that the two men knew about the attack and communicated with the men who carried it out. Their sentencing brings to a close one of the darkest periods in Kenya's history, and for the victims' families, justice and some closure. Robert Magila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
China has laid out its development blueprint for the next 5 years. In a news conference on Friday, Chinese authorities explained the main points highlighted in its communique released Thursday. The blueprint, known as the 14th Five-Year Plan, covers the years 2021 to 2025 and is aligned with the country's longer-term vision, 2035. The government has stressed that these plans are vital for China's future. Zhang Yibing has the details.
More details have been released for China's blueprint for economic and social development in the next 5 years and beyond.
For the first time, we put forward a clear and substantial progress for common prosperity in our long-term vision.
The government's vision for 2035 sets the deadline for the country to achieve what it calls the socialist modernization. It predicts the vibrant economy, robust technological capacity, and a comprehensive national strength. Over the next 5 years, the focus will be on the real economy, fostering healthy economic growth. To achieve that, officials say China will continue to put its own science and technology innovation at the core of its drive and keep its doors open.
We always stress on planning such innovation with a global view, and we will actively merge into the global network in the sector.
This is part of China's move to open up, even when its domestic demand and supply is now at the forefront of its business circulation strategy.
We plan to develop a new growth pattern with the domestic market as the mainstay and the domestic and international markets reinforcing each other.
Officials highlighted China's achievements in its 13th five-year plan, such as lifting 55 million residents out of poverty. And this year, China's gross domestic product, or GDP, is expected to exceed 100 trillion yuan, or almost $15 trillion.
This proposal opens up a new course of the building of a modern socialist country and leads China towards its goals in the next 100 years.
The blueprint for China's 14th five-year plan and the vision for the year 2035 are moving forward. The final version will be released early next year. Officials say the blueprints are expected to guide concrete policies that will improve lives of 1.4 billion Chinese people. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
China's 14th five-year plan has brought a great impact all over the world. In South Africa, many Chinese students studying in the country followed through the meeting in Beijing and had a lot of great things to say about it. Let's have a listen.
For the 13th five-year plan, their goal is to reduce poverty. And today, if we look at China, people that are living in poverty conditions has been reduced. No one has to worry about what they're going to eat today, what they're going to wear, and where they're going to live. So I think right now in South Africa, there's a large population that's still living under poverty. And I think it is time for South Africa to learn new methods and new ways to reduce the level of poverty from China.
My parents have shops here and their business are operating very badly at the moment due to the high unemployment rate, and then people don't have incomes. So in comparison to previous years, our revenue has been decreased. However, my family in China, they are doing pretty well because the economic in China has recovered very quickly in there.
I think it is very important for the world as the world is using up so much energy, and it's great for China to focus on this area and really move forward together with the world. I'm really excited to see what China can bring for us this time.
China has donated food and non-food items to communities in South Africa during this time of the novel coronavirus pandemic. The donations include medical supplies. This was done through the South African Parliament. The items will be distributed to the Red Hill community. South Africa's Deputy National Assembly Speaker thanked China for standing with the South African nation during this time.
We wish others from bigger economies, bigger countries, in spite of temptations to do otherwise, do realize the value of solidarity inside our countries, developing countries and elsewhere, so that they too can do more than they are doing right now.
This is the second donation that we have made towards Honorable Deputy Speaker's office, and this is only one part of our serious donations that we have made to local people's support to fight against COVID-19 pandemic.
Our coverage continues. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more news. Don't go away.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Now, more details have come to light about the attacker who killed 3 people in the French city of Nice. Brahim Assouawi was a Tunisian national who was previously arrested in 2016 for violence and using a knife. Italy's interior minister said he had passed through Italy on his way to France after arriving on a migrant boat in September. The suspect's family said in a televised statement that they were surprised he was in France and had no idea what he was planning. Police in France have also arrested a second suspect who's believed to have been in contact with the attacker. France has heightened its security alert amid religious and geopolitical tensions. Meanwhile, Nice residents have held a memorial service for victims of the attack. Mourners and religious representatives of various faiths laid wreaths in front of the city's Notre Dame church where the attack happened. They said the attack was, quote, a tragedy and called for peace.
I'm from Nice, and this is a tragedy once again. We're a free country. We have demonstrated freedom to all countries in the world. Today, this freedom is closing in on us. Everyone has the right to live. Let's love freedom. That's a message to the world. Life should be spiritual. No God should kill.
With the number of COVID-19 cases steadily rising in Kenya, the government is now being urged to ensure regional hospitals have the capability of producing oxygen for their own use. According to experts, the availability of medical oxygen in hospitals could be the difference between life and death. CGTN's Enoch Sokolia reports.
Oxygen is critical in the provision of emergency care, and seriously ill COVID-19 patients risk death if the gas is not available in hospitals or smaller health facilities. In Kenyan hospitals, lack of oxygen is more often the norm rather than the exception, and where it is available, it's usually too expensive, a cost that is passed to the patient. Many private hospitals charge about $20 per hour, which means medical bills run into thousands of US if the patient has been on oxygen support continuously for a month. And given the importance of oxygen in the management of COVID-19, the World Health Organization has added it to the list of essential medicines that hospitals must have. The WHO recently lauded some Kenyan hospitals for installing gas plants. Anthony Chwoni, a biomedical engineer at Kenyatta University Hospital, says installing a gas plant is not only cost-effective, but it is also essential if many lives are to be saved.
All along, we supply the oxygen 24/7. So at any given time, our hospital will never lack in oxygen. which is a key fighting component for the COVID-19 patient. Most of the patients require oxygen therapy.
Mainstream hospitals relying on vendors to supply oxygen are spending an average of $100,000 a month on it, according to some sources. But for those that have invested hundreds of thousands of US dollars into gas plants, they have enough oxygen for their needs and access to support other hospitals. Kenyatta University Hospital is now supporting neighboring hospitals during the pandemic.
We have 4 units. One unit can supply or produce oxygen 414 liters per hour. So if you multiply them times 4, it gives you like around 2,400, 500 liters per hour.
Kenyatta University Hospital has been on the forefront in the fight against COVID-19 here in Kenya. And doctors at this facility maintain that this plant has been a lifesaver.
So eventually we save a lot, not in terms of monitoring, but also saving the nation. As we don't count it as a monitoring issue, but how many people benefit from it.
WHO now wants more African countries to borrow a leaf from Kenya, even as the number of reported cases continue to rise across the continent. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN.
A new eco-friendly park has been opened in Ethiopia, becoming the first of its kind in the country. The Ntoto Park, situated inside a forest just outside Addis Ababa city, took about a year to build. It is also part of the government's plan to develop clean and green tourist attractions. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi has more details.
On the outskirts of Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, lies the Ntoto forest. For years, the only people who came here were either women collecting firewood to sell or Ethiopia's legendary long-distance runners to train. Now, the hope is that people from around the world will visit it. That is because the forest is now home to the country's first ever carbon-neutral health park.
No vehicle with diesel and carbon emission will be allowed in that area. So that is a different one, a health park. So it's a historical park because Ethiopia is known for its athletes. You see, athletes still now make their exercise, physical exercise in that area. So when we open it, it will be a health park. People go and make physical exercise either by jogging, running, or riding bicycles or riding a horse.
The multipurpose park was built mostly with local materials and includes indoor and outdoor centers for physical activities. It also has a library, restaurants, fountains, walkways, and bicycles and scooter lanes. I'm standing on top of what they call the suspended restaurant. They call it so because it has been constructed on top of literary space. There's just a river, a small river that passes underneath. And from here we can get an idea of how vast the Ntoto forest is. And the forest is located at close to 3,000 meters above sea level. This is part of the Sheger River project, an initiative by Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to develop natural areas and in the process clean up rivers and create thousands of new jobs.
These projects have not been financed through public funds. They have been done through the goodwill of the Prime Minister and the partnerships that he has established and the friendship that he's established. So none of them have gone into government coffers as well.
But some critics have argued that the government is destroying the forest while setting up the park.
Maximum effort is made to minimize the damage to the forest. Okay, so the service area, the hotels, and some the areas where buildings are developed are selected in the Ntoto Park where there is no or minimum trees are there. You see, so it is done deliberately, just to minimize the damage to the forest.
Next month, the Great Ethiopian Run, a company owned by the legendary athlete Haile Gebrselassie, will organize an athletics competition here. The Ethiopian government is hoping that beyond sports, parks like this will boost both tourism and the economy. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Africa's carbon emissions remain low compared to those of developed countries. Yet the continent is already suffering some of the worst effects of climate change. As a result, African governments are trying to mitigate the effects of climate change We earlier spoke to Dr. David Monnier, who is the director of the Center for Africa-China Studies at the South Africa's University of Johannesburg. Dr. Monnier has also been writing articles on climate change in local and international publications. He begins by explaining what African nations can learn from China in this matter.
I think China presents Africa with a number of lessons. The major one is to ensure that as we begin, we could start in a much better position than China. Since 1978, I think China did much of the development using some of the energy that was not that friendly to environment. However, in recent decades, we have seen a massive move by the Chinese government and leadership in reversing some of the negative impact of the development in China. In our case, I think we're starting from a low base, and I don't think we need to go for development in a manner that we destroy our environment and try to reverse the situation. I think some of the major factors that we can learn from China is to have a mixed energy. While we're using coal, we gradually reduce coal, and at the same time using wind power, we can use solar power and all other environment-friendly forms of energy, and ensure that you conscientize the population in terms of their use and interaction with energy, or the way we develop our agriculture and all other labor-intensive sectors. And those are some of the lessons that we see emanating from China and targeting on a 5-year or 10-year process. But it will indeed take more time on the African continent to achieve some of these strategic objectives of lowering high carbon energy, as China is doing, for the mere fact that we are 54 countries while China is just one country. And our policies might not be as advanced, as unified, even though at the continental level, there are attempts that are being made. Africa is already working with China. I think through the Africa-China Forum, there has been a number of programs. And if you look in some of the major infrastructure that Chinese companies are building on the African continent, I think they're starting to answer some of these core issues of climate change. Ensure that you have environment studies that ensure that due diligence is taken before embarking on massive infrastructure development, as well as massive investments in solar energy, as well as other forms or low carbon energy on the African continent. And I think these efforts in the long run is going to have a positive impact on Africa's environment.
More and more young people around Africa are venturing into the informal sector, seeking to create jobs. They are using innovations to pursue their dreams while creating employment in the process. Now, one of them is Alex Kamanga, a Kenyan entrepreneur and founder of Fundis, an online app. CGTN's Wanja Mungai caught up with him and filed this report.
It's early morning and Charlene Kamau is plying her trade. At the age of 20, she's already pursuing her passion as a plumber. She works at Fundis, a startup company based in Nairobi, Kenya.
I started this profession after school, whereby I joined Fundis. This was my first place to work, which was in 2019. I've actually learned more than plumbing, whereby I relate with electricians, painters. So in the line of work, I've learned more than plumbing, whereby I can actually learn a little bit of electrical work, because at the same point, you go to sites with them and you learn more.
Fundis is a Swahili word for artisans. The startup was established in 2019 as an online platform that connects artisans with clients.
It's very hard to find a repair person when you need one. How and where do you find a repair expert when you really need one? So what Fundis does is simply we smoothen that process. We enable workers, these repairmen, to find jobs regularly, while you as a customer, from the point of just your mobile phone, you can be able to be joined with a technician any place.
His app has a network of 2,000 artisans spread across the country. To book, one needs to select the required service on their smartphone and key in a description. You'd also need to attach a picture of the problem you need fixed. The team will then connect you with an artisan who will give a job quotation.
They've always been very efficient. What I like most about them is it's a matter of a phone call, and in 20-30 minutes you have a fundi who arrives at your place of repairs.
Kenya is ranked as a leading tech hub in Africa, and with startups like Fundis coming up rapidly, that could be the answer to the youth unemployment dilemma. The Kenya National Bureau of Statistics says the unemployment rates in the country have doubled. The rate is at 10% compared to 5% in March, when the country recorded the first coronavirus case. Those working with Fundis consider themselves lucky during these tough economic times.
The return is good because now we have many clients, so I can't complain. Fundis app has really helped us.
The job comes with its challenges, though. For Charlene, being so young and a woman in a male-dominated field presents a fair share of trials and tribulations.
The moment you step into someone's compound and then they're like, wow, you're the one coming to do that, and is that part of it where people don't actually believe you can do it?
Fundis hope to extend their services beyond Kenyan borders and to include more services in its app's offerings. Wanja Mungai, CGTN, Nairobi.
And to food matters now, and Africa is blessed with a huge population of young people. With 60% of Africans living in rural areas where agriculture is the mainstay, the time for the continent to be food secure is now. Here is CGTN's Beatrice Marshall with the first episode of Dimensions.
The inability to produce enough food to feed Africa's slightly over 1.2 billion people could in the long term pose the biggest threat to the continent's peace and security. The tragedy of this situation is its irony. Some statistics can help put the continent's untapped agricultural potential in perspective. 60% of the world's arable land, the world's youngest labor force, took up it. 60% of the population live in rural areas, the heartland of farming. Now, a 2019 McKinsey report found that Africa could in fact be 2 to 3 times more productive if it intensified its agricultural productivity. And it has been shown to work. In just 5 years, between 2004 and 2008, Malawi moved from a food-deficient country to a food surplus, one with the ability to export to its neighbors. The magic bullet was a farm input subsidy program that targeted smallholders. Indeed, the case for a strong agricultural sector is fairly straightforward. According to the World Bank, agriculture is Africa's largest economic sector, representing 15% of the continent's total GDP, or more than $100 billion annually. So what ought to be done? The key decision of the 2003 Maputo Declaration on Agriculture and Food Security that required countries to invest 10% of their national budgets in agricultural development must be adhered to. Increased investment in cultivation will help combat spiraling food shortages, hunger and malnutrition. Agriculture ought to be repackaged to appeal to the youth. In an increasingly digital world, technology can drive agricultural transformation. Young people are more innovative and tech-savvy. And frankly, it's going to be difficult to achieve the much-desired economic takeoff without sustained food security. Africa, the time to refocus is now. And working hand in hand with the international community can help achieve faster the goal of a food-secure world for all humanity.
The news continues on Africa Live. Time now for our business segment with Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. South African state power utility Eskom makes a net loss of $1.3 billion. And the World Bank warns that Somalia's economy will shrink by 2.5%.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And let's start off in South Africa. The country's state power utility Eskom says that it made a net loss of $1.3 billion in its financial year ending in March 2020. But the company, which struggles to power Africa's most industrialized economy and is reliant on government bailouts, expects to make an even larger loss of $1.6 billion in the current financial year, which ends in March 2021. Now, the expected deterioration is primarily because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on electricity sales. Eskom's debt rose to about $29.6 billion from roughly $27 billion a year earlier. The new debt figure is equivalent to more than 9% of the country's gross domestic product. Meanwhile, the World Bank has warned that Somalia's economy will shrink by 2.5% this year, revising its initial forecast of 3.2% growth due to the impact of the coronavirus crisis. Apart from the pandemic, the Horn of Africa economy has also been hit by severe flooding this year and a widespread infestation of desert locusts, which is in its second wave. Now, the pandemic is projected to push the economy into contraction, increase fiscal pressures, and deepen poverty in 2020. Somalia secured the ability to receive debt forgiveness from key creditors back in March, following years of a slow recovery accompanied by frequent violence by militants, allowing it to return to the international financial system for the first time in 30 years. Now, Somalia and climate experts are warning of harsh weather conditions in the coming months. The country's livestock sector is expected to be amongst the hardest hit, worrying both livestock traders and nomadic communities. Well, CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo has more on that from Mogadishu.
At this livestock market in Baidoa, one of the biggest in the region, business is not booming. A combination of climate-related disasters in recent months has affected the once thriving sector. Climate experts are now warning that dry conditions is expected to last until the end of the year.
More than 85% of the community living here relies on the livestock sector for survival. We are praying for good weather and sufficient rain. As pastoralists, we have suffered from the harsh weather patterns in the recent years.
Trade is not good. Livestock owners have moved to other regions in search of pasture and water for their animals. This has reduced the price value for animals, with fewer traders interested in selling their animals.
Livestock trade, mainly to oil-rich Arab countries, accounts for up to 40% of Somalia's GDP. But a combination of climate shocks, outbreak of diseases, and international bans has dealt a huge blow to the industry that provides direct and indirect employment to millions of people across the country. Experts are now warning that the government must do more to protect the sector.
Somalia exports livestock mainly to Arab countries. In the event of natural disasters or any other major issue, the supply of livestock export reduces and in turn affects the overall economy. The government must cushion livestock owners by providing them with vaccines for animals and securing more markets for traders.
The COVID-19 pandemic also led to a reduction in livestock exports as governments around the world moved to impose restrictions and lockdowns in efforts to curb the spread of the infectious disease. In other countries, livestock marketplaces were forced to shut down, further increasing the cost of supplying livestock to international markets, a burden mostly shouldered by Somali livestock traders. A massive locust invasion, the worst in a quarter of a century, has also added to the challenges facing pastoral communities. Parts of Puntland, Somaliland and central regions of the country remain the worst affected. Authorities are now using helicopters to spray biopesticides as more swarms continue to form in new areas. Meanwhile, back at the livestock market, traders say they want government support to help them cushion from future shocks. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
And on to Zimbabwe now. The government recently authorized the resumption of intercity travel as it further opens up its economy. It is expected to yield positive results in the transport sector amidst the coronavirus pandemic. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with the story.
Transport operators can now breathe a sigh of relief after Zimbabwe's government lifted restrictions on travel. Passengers can now gear up for long-distance movement amid government calls for an increase in public transport.
The opening up of the intercity and the economy in general has meant that there are more passengers traveling. So that means we need more transport, public transport to be on the road. Unlike the current situation where there's shortage of transport and there is some effect with regards to the interchange of passengers between intercity and urban transport, where there are less Zupcos at urban transport and there are now more people traveling at intercity.
The government says bus operators have failed to meet the stipulated COVID-19 protocols. Operators are expected to obtain a COVID-19 compliance certificate, which requires them to have an operating address. Failure to meet the requirements has led to the rapid rise of private vehicles operating as an alternative.
Over 40,000 combis are parked and there are over 500 to 700,000 people, including crew and other workers and dependents in the downstream industries that have been affected by the parking of those small combi vehicles. As small operators, we cannot afford that, so we need to be operating in groups. So we are now urging operators to come into groups and make sure that they get those COVID certificates as an association rather than as individuals.
The union representing operators is now lobbying the government to allow critical compliance guidelines of COVID-19 to be followed.
There's need for relaxation to make sure that everyone plays his role, at the same time making sure that the major requirements are met, which is the sanitization of passengers, the taking of temperature, the wearing of PPE by crew, and also making sure that the passengers have got the masks whilst they are in the queue or boarding or inside the vehicle. Those are the major issues that needs to be stressed upon.
Strict new operational procedures and an upgrade of terminuses are among measures being introduced to ensure the resumption of intercity bus services and prevent further spread of the coronavirus. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Well, Let's get you some international news now. In Europe, the Eurozone economy rebounded more than expected in the third quarter of this year from its coronavirus-induced slump, with GDP in 19 nations surging over 12% quarter on quarter, and that's after contracting almost 12% in the second. Now, economists had expected a 9 to 10% rise instead, but the rebound is being overshadowed by worries over a new wave of infections in the region. European Central Bank head Christine Lagarde says she expects November to be very negative and that the last quarter's numbers will be on the downside.
Recent hard data, survey results and high-frequency indicators point to a significant softening in economic activity in the final quarter of the year. And clearly what we expect is in the course of 21, probably the latter part of 21, a recovery that will begin picking up and resulting in demand being stimulated yet again. In the meantime, we're not going to just stand still. We are going to use all the instruments that we have with the entire flexibility that we have, and I'm clearly here referring to PEP more than others, to address the situation and to address any development of the situation.
In the meantime, Britain can afford to ramp up its already massive spending push to counter the effects of the coronavirus pandemic on the economy. That is according to the head of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva. She called on Finance Minister Rishi Sunak to increase public investment and to boost welfare support for those who have lost their jobs over this crisis. Now, the IMF estimates Britain is on course to rack up a budget deficit of 16.5% of GDP this year. That's a move that has raised alarms in the ruling Conservative Party. And back to the continent now. Egyptian and Sudanese officials have met in Cairo to further discuss a project to connect both nations through railway and road links. The over 1,200-kilometer route will transport passengers between both nations, as well as products and goods, in order to foster bilateral trade and development. It is also the first phase of an ambitious project to connect Cairo with Cape Town city in South Africa. Here is Yasser Hakim with the details.
Egypt is speeding up the land transport connections with its southern neighbor after a one-year lull due to political upheavals in Sudan. Cairo has already constructed the railway infrastructure from Aswan to the Sudan border. When ready, the railway will link Egypt's Alexandria city on the Mediterranean Sea with Sudan's capital Khartoum.
The railway link will increase passenger movement, trade and cargo shipments with Sudan. Egypt is aggressively active in several African countries with infrastructure projects and investments in different sectors. Now it is pushing for the railway and road link to expand beyond Sudan and connect the whole continent economically, especially now there are countries with no sea access, so that they can transport their products via railway to different ports for shipping. I believe the land route will be the base to establish the dream of an African Union similar to the EU in Europe.
The cost of this railway link with Sudan has not been revealed, but Cairo says the Kuwait Fund for Economic Development will be an investor in the project. Like any project, there are some challenges that are being addressed by both sides.
There are challenges. One is technical. The two railway lines are different in width size, which makes it hard to link. Experts decided to construct the Sudan railway line according to Egypt's updated specifications. The other two challenges are funding and political will. Funding will be covered through loans and international funds. As for political will, it is obvious now, with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi pushing to finalize the project soon and the positive response from the current Sudanese leadership.
Besides the railway, there is another ambitious project for a land road that connects Egypt with Chad. Hassan Mehdi had been a board member of this project that's advising the Transportation Ministry.
It is part of the Cairo-Cape Town road that I have done feasibility studies on. Egypt has already upgraded the Asyut road and is developing the road from Aswan to Sudan borders. The road is very important to create economic integration between African countries, facilitating passenger transport and trade. It will add huge value to uniting the continent economically.
Intra-African trade has been much lower than the potential of the continent. Cairo hopes the railway and road routes could help raise trade and investment volumes, thus improving African economies. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up ahead on Global Business Africa, Kenya Airways proposes a radical plan to pay its pilots as it struggles to cut its wage bill. We'll bring you more on that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Well, we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up. Here's what's ahead. In sports, Confederation of African Football President Ahmed Ahmed